Hey guys, tonight we're going to pull back the velvet curtains on one of the most famous and famously tragic families in history. We're going to talk about the final days of the Romanov dynasty, but not in the way you might think. We're going to get right into the heart of it. The quiet, unsettling family drama that ultimately brought an empire to its knees. This isn't a story of grand battles and political maneuvers, it's a story of love, fear, and a terrifyingly high-stakes secret. This is a story that reminds you that even if you're a king, you can't run away from your own life. And in this particular case, you probably wouldn't have survived it. The end of an empire is rarely a pretty sight, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's the easiest way to tell me you're into it. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and what time it is for you. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are born into a world of impossible wealth and even more impossible expectations. The year is 1868, and you are Nicholas, the eldest son of the Tsar of all of Russia. Alexander III, from the moment you take your first breath, your life is not your own. It is a thing of state, a sacred trust, a future that is not a choice but a burden. You are not just a boy, you are the heir to a throne that controls a sixth of the world's landmass. The expectations, the pressures, the unending stream of tutors and lessons. It's all a heavy blanket that settles on you from day one. You're being groomed for a job you don't particularly want and for a world you don't really understand. Your father, a man of immense physical stature and a deeply conservative mind, is a difficult person to please. He rules Russia with an iron fist, a reaction to the assassination of his own father. Your grandfather. He is a man who believes in the absolute, divine right of the Tsar to rule, a man who has no time for democracy or liberal ideas. He expects you to be the same, to be a strong, decisive, and unwavering ruler. But you are not him. You are a gentle, shy, and introverted young man. You prefer quiet walks, photography, and the simple pleasures of a normal life. You are, in every sense of the word, a reluctant heir as you grow. You get a small taste of the world outside the gilded cage of your royal upbringing. You travel. You meet new people. You see new places. It's during this time that you meet her. Her name is Alex of Hesse, a German princess who is a granddaughter of Queen Victoria of England. She is shy, deeply religious, and, you feel, the only person in the world who truly understands you. Your romance is a quiet, profound thing, a love story born in the suffocating formality of European royal courts. But your father, the Tsar, is not pleased. He wants you to marry a French princess, to form a more strategic alliance, yeah, but you are stubborn in this one thing. This one choice is yours. The political world around you is a tense and dangerous place. Russia is an empire that is boiling beneath a thin, fragile crust of peace. The people are poor, the peasants are landless, and the whispers of revolution, of a new kind of world where the Tsar does not exist, are growing louder. Your father, in his strength, manages to keep the lid on the pot. But you can feel the heat rising. You can feel the pressure building. You know, deep down, that you are not the man who can keep this cauldron from boiling over. One of the less-known details about Nicholas is his love of simple life. He was a man who would much rather have been a farmer or a simple soldier. His diaries are full of mundane details, of the weather, of his family, of the small, simple joys of a quiet life. They are not the diaries of a man who is obsessed with power or politics. They are the diaries of a man who is a prisoner of his own life. The great, terrible day finally arrives. Your father. Tsar Alexander III dies unexpectedly in 1894. You are 26 years old, and you are now the Tsar of all Russia. The weight of the world, a world you do not understand and a job you do not want, is now on your shoulders, you famously say. I am not ready to be Tsar. I never wanted to be one. I know nothing of the business of ruling. It's an honest and heartbreaking admission. It is also, in many ways, the unvarnished truth of your reign. Historians still debate whether Nicholas II was a truly bad ruler or simply a man who was out of his depth. The overwhelming consensus is the latter. He was not a cruel man, but he was a weak and indecisive one. He was a man who, in a time that required a strong hand and a clear vision, was incapable of providing either. He was a man who, in the face of a rising storm, chose to retreat into the quiet, private world of his family, and that family, a small, insular, and increasingly isolated group, is where the true drama of your reign will begin. Your beautiful German princess, the woman you have finally married, is now your empress and your love story. Once so pure and so true, is about to be consumed by the dark forces of history. Your reign begins not with a glorious coronation, but with a horrifying tragedy. It's 1896, and you are officially crowned Tsar, but to celebrate the event, a massive public feast is organized at Kudinka Field outside of Moscow. The organizers, in their incompetence, have promised food, drinks, and souvenirs for the hundreds of thousands of peasants who have gathered. But the field itself is a treacherous maze of ravines and ditches, and the crowd control is non-existent. A rumor starts to spread that there are not enough souvenirs to go around, and a stampede begins. You are not there. Of course, you are in your palace, surrounded by the opulence and the formalities of your court. But the news arrives. A horrifying report of thousands of people being trampled to death in the muddy field. It's a tragedy of unimaginable scale. Over 100 to 300 people die, and thousands more are injured. The apathetic incompetence of the Tsar's government, a government that you now lead, is on full display. But the tragedy is compounded by your reaction, or lack thereof. Your advisors, in their short-sightedness, tell you that to cancel the celebratory ball that evening would be a sign of weakness. You listen to them, you and your new wife, the Empress Alexandra, attend the ball, and you are seen dancing and laughing with the French ambassador. The image of the Tsar dancing while the bodies of his people are still being pulled from the mud is a public relations disaster of epic proportions. The nickname Nicholas the Bloody begins to circulate, a moniker that will stick to you for the rest of your life. This is the brutal start to your reign, a moment that forever stains your reputation and sows the seeds of public resentment. Your reign continues to be plagued by misfortune and bad decisions. You are a man who wants to be a good ruler, but you are a man who is incapable of making a good decision. You believe in the divine right of the Tsar to rule, a belief that puts you at odds with the modernizing forces of your time. Your wife, the Empress Alexandra, is just as devoutly religious and even more convinced of your absolute power. She is a shy, introverted woman who is not well liked by the Russian aristocracy, who see her as a cold, German outsider. She, in turn, trusts no one but you, and a small circle of sycophants and yes-men. This is the central drama of your reign. You are a man who is completely isolated from his own people. You are a man who has no understanding of their suffering, their poverty, and their growing anger. You rely on a small circle of advisors, a small group of men who are often more interested in their own power and their own wealth than in the welfare of the Russian people. You are the Tsar, but you are also a prisoner, a man in a gilded cage who has no real understanding of the world outside its walls. One of the more tragic details of your reign is the fact that you and your wife were deeply, profoundly in love. Your letters to each other, which have survived to this day, are a testament to a deep and abiding love. They are not the letters of a distant, political marriage, but the letters of two people who were truly devoted to each other. This love, this beautiful and powerful thing, will ultimately be one of the things that leads to your downfall. Your love for your wife. A woman who is not a political animal will cause you to trust her judgment over the judgment of your own ministers. And her judgment, as we will soon see, is not to be trusted. Historians still debate whether a different Tsar could have saved the Romanov dynasty. The overwhelming consensus is that the Russian Empire, in its state of corruption and social unrest, was a ticking time bomb. The revolution was a force that was a long time coming, but a different Tsar, a stronger, more decisive, and more politically savvy Tsar, might have been able to delay the inevitable, or at least to give the monarchy a fighting chance. You, as Tsar Nicholas II, are not that man. You are a man who is more interested in the quiet pleasures of family life than in the brutal, messy business of ruling an empire, and that, in a time of great upheaval, is a fatal flaw. The stage is set for the next great tragedy of your reign. The seeds of public resentment have been sown, and the love story of you and your empress, a beautiful and powerful thing, is about to be consumed by the dark forces of a terrible, terrible secret. A secret that will bring a new, disturbing character into your family's life. A man who will ultimately tear your entire world apart, your reign, which began with a terrible tragedy and an even more terrible public blunder, continues to descend into a nightmare of your own making. You are a man who is not built for the modern world. You believe in a God-given right to rule, an idea that is as old as the hills, but one that is quickly becoming obsolete in a world of industrialization and political upheaval. Your wife, the Empress Alexandra, is even more out of touch. She is a shy, reclusive woman who is not a political animal, but a woman who is fiercely devoted to her family and to her faith. She sees the criticisms of your rule not as a sign of a real problem in your country, but as a sign of disrespect for the divine will of God. Your world, a world of gilded palaces and formal ceremonies, is a quiet, isolated place. You and your family, your 4 daughters and your young son, live in a bubble that is a world away from the grinding poverty and the growing anger of the Russian people. You see your country not as a collection of people, but as a sacred trust, a family estate that has been passed down to you from your father, and that you must pass on to your son. It is a beautiful but deeply flawed way of looking at the world, and it will be your ultimate undoing. Then, in 1904, the greatest joy of your life is born. It is a son, the Tsarevich Alexei. You and your wife, after having 4 daughters, are overjoyed. You finally have a male heir, a man who will one day take your place on the throne. But your joy is short-lived. It soon becomes clear that something is terribly wrong with your son. He bruises easily, and he bleeds uncontrollably from even the smallest cut. The doctors, in their hushed tones, give you the terrible diagnosis your son has hemophilia, a genetic disease that is passed down from the female line. It is a disease that, in the early 20th century, is a death sentence. This is the great, terrible secret that will come to define your reign. Your son, the heir to the throne of all of Russia, is a sick child, a fragile boy who could bleed to death from a simple fall. This is a secret that you cannot share with your people. To admit that your son, the future of the Romanov dynasty, is a sick child would be a sign of weakness, a sign that the divine right of the Tsar is not all that it seems. It would be a blow to the very foundation of your rule. So you and your wife, in a desperate act of self-preservation, decide to keep the secret. Your wife, the Empress Alexandra, is consumed by this secret. She is a woman who has already been criticized by the Russian aristocracy for her German heritage and her reclusive nature. Now, She is a mother with a dying son, a mother who is desperate for a cure. She spends her days and nights praying, visiting churches, and seeking out anyone who might be able to help her son. The royal doctors, with their old world methods and their useless remedies, are no help. Your wife, a woman who is desperate to save her son, begins to look for a different kind of help. One of the more tragic details of this period is the fact that hemophilia was a disease that ran in the royal families of Europe. Passed down from Queen Victoria of England, your wife, a granddaughter of Queen Victoria, had inherited the gene and had, unknowingly, passed it on to your son. It's a sad and ironic twist of fate. A reminder that even the most powerful families in the world are not immune to the random cruelty of genetics. Historians still debate the extent to which Alexei's illness affected your reign. Was it the sole cause of your downfall, or was it just one more tragic element in a long list of problems? The overwhelming consensus is that it was a major contributing factor. The secrecy surrounding Alexei's illness isolated you and your wife from the rest of the court. It made you both paranoid and suspicious of anyone who might discover your secret. It drove your wife, a desperate mother, to seek out a different kind of help, a kind of help that would lead to a new, and ultimately more dangerous, character entering your family's life, a man who will come to be known as Rasputin. The stage is set for the final act of your family's tragic drama. The political turmoil of your country is a low hum in the background, a low hum that you are trying your best to ignore. Your son, the heir to your throne, is a sick boy who is slowly bleeding to death. Your wife, a desperate mother, is looking for a miracle, and that miracle, in a way, is about to arrive. But it will not be the kind of miracle that will save your son. It will be the kind of miracle that will destroy your entire world. The year is 1905, and the world outside the palace walls is a maelstrom of chaos. Russia has just lost a humiliating war against Japan, a defeat that has exposed the deep-seated corruption and inefficiency of your government. The people, starving and furious, have risen up in a series of strikes and protests. The Bloody Sunday Massacre, in which imperial troops fired on a peaceful demonstration of workers in St. Petersburg, has shattered the illusion of a benevolent czar. The low hum of revolution that you have so long ignored is now a loud, angry roar. But you in your quiet palace are insulated from it all. You are still the Tsar, but you are also a prisoner of your own making. A man who is more concerned with the health of his son than with the health of his nation. Your wife, the Empress Alexandra, is consumed by this. She is a woman who is already isolated from the court and the public. Now, she is a mother with a dying son. A son who, with every small cut or bruise, reminds her of her own genetic flaw. She spends her days and nights in a state of perpetual anxiety, praying, fasting, and searching for a cure. She has lost all faith in the royal doctors, who can do nothing but give her a series of useless remedies. She has become a woman who is desperate, and desperate people do desperate things. She begins to look for a different kind of help, a kind of help that is not a part of the formal, scientific world of medicine. This is where the whispers begin. The whispers of a holy man, a peasant from Siberia who is said to have healing powers. His name is Grigory Rasputin. He is not a man of the court. He is not a nobleman. He is a peasant, a man with a wild beard, a strange, hypnotic gaze, and a reputation for being a drunkard and a womanizer. He is the last person you would expect to see in the opulent halls of the imperial palace. But your wife, in her desperation, sees him as something else entirely. She sees him as a man of God, a man who might be able to save her son. The first time you meet him, he is a strange, unsettling presence. He is not a formal man. He is a peasant, a man who is not afraid to speak his mind, a man who has a raw, animalistic charisma. He talks to your son. He prays over him. and he does something that no one else has been able to do. He calms him. He seems to have a strange, hypnotic effect on Alexei, an effect that no one can explain. When Alexei is in his presence, the bleeding seems to stop. His pain seems to subside. Your wife, a woman who has been driven to the brink of despair, sees this as a miracle. She sees him not as a charlatan, but as a saint, a man who has been sent by God to save her son. This is the great, central tragedy of your family's drama. You and your wife, in your love for your son, are willing to overlook everything else. You are willing to overlook Rasputin's dubious reputation, his peasant origins, his strange and unsettling presence. You are willing to overlook the fact that your court, your ministers, and your own family are all horrified by him. You are willing to overlook the fact that he is a man who is clearly using his position to gain power and influence. All you care about is the fact that he seems to be able to help your son. One of the more bizarre details about Rasputin is his strange, hypnotic power. Was it a real supernatural power, as your wife believed? Or was it just a coincidence, a placebo effect that was so powerful that it actually worked? Historians still debate this to this day. The fact is that he did seem to have a calming effect on Alexei, and that was all that mattered to you and your wife. Historians still debate the true level of Rasputin's influence. Was he truly the power behind the throne? A man who was running the country from behind the scenes? Or was he a charlatan? A man who was simply good at manipulating a desperate woman? The truth is likely somewhere in the middle. He was not a political genius, but he was a man who had an incredible amount of influence over your wife, and by extension, over you. He was a man who, in a time of great political and social upheaval, was able to get you to listen to him and to ignore the advice of your own ministers. This is the beginning of the end. You, in your love for your son, have brought a wolf into your gilded cage, and that wolf is about to tear your family and your empire apart. Rasputin is now a part of your family's life, a strange and unsettling presence in the opulent, formal world of the imperial court. He is not just a healer for your son, he is now a confidant for your wife, the Empress Alexandra. She, in her isolation and her desperation, has come to see him as a saint, a man who has been sent by God to save her family. She listens to him, she trusts him, and she believes in him with a blind, fervent faith that is both beautiful and terrifying. You, the Tsar, are a man caught in the middle. You see the flaws in Rasputin, the rumors of his drunkenness, his womanizing, his strange and unsettling behavior. Your ministers, your advisors, your own family, they all warn you against him. They tell you that he is a charlatan, a dangerous fraud who is corrupting your court and destroying your reputation. But you are a man who is a prisoner of his own heart. You see the effect he has on your wife, a woman you love more than anything in the world. You see the effect he has on your son, a boy you love more than life itself. And so, you turn a blind eye. You allow him to stay. The influence of Rasputin begins to grow. He is not just a healer now, he is a power broker. People who want to get ahead in the court, people who want to gain favor with the Empress, all go to him. He becomes a man who can get you a job, a promotion, a position of power. He is a man who can get you an audience with the Tsar. He is a man who is running the country from behind the scenes. A peasant with a dirty beard and a hypnotic gaze who now holds the fate of an empire in his hands. The court, which was already a nest of vipers and political intrigue, is now in a state of outright chaos. The old aristocracy, the men who have served the Romanov dynasty for centuries, are horrified by Rasputin. They see him as a symbol of everything that is wrong with your reign. They see him as a sign of your weakness, of your wife's fanaticism, and of the fundamental instability of your government. They try to get rid of him. They try to poison him. They try to convince you to send him away. But you, in your stubbornness and your love for your family, refuse. One of the more bizarre and tragic details of this period is the sheer number of rumors that circulate about Rasputin. He is said to be a magician, a hypnotist, a man who has a sexual hold over the Empress. He is said to be a German spy, a man who is working to undermine the war effort. The rumors are so wild and so outlandish that they are almost unbelievable. But they are also a reflection of the utter desperation and the complete lack of faith that the people have in your government. Historians still debate the true nature of the relationship between Rasputin and the Empress. Was it a physical relationship, as the rumors suggested, or was it a spiritual one? A bond between a desperate mother and a man she believed was a saint? The overwhelming consensus is the latter. The Empress, in her letters, is a woman who is completely devoted to her husband and her family, but she is also a woman who is so desperate to save her son that she is willing to believe in a man who the rest of the world sees as a devil. This is the central, tragic paradox of your family's story. The stage is set for the final bloody act. The country is in a state of chaos. The people are starving. The army is in a state of disarray, and the whispers of revolution are growing louder and louder. And you, the Tsar, a man who is meant to be a symbol of strength and stability, are a man who is in a state of complete paralysis. You are a man who is more concerned with the health of his son and the feelings of his wife than with the fate of his country. The world around you is about to catch fire. And you, a man who has been a prisoner in your own palace for so long, are about to be consumed by the flames. The year is 1914. The simmering pot of political tension, of a hungry populace, and a deeply flawed government finally boils over. The spark that lights the fire is not a Russian one, but a global one. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo sets off a chain reaction that plunges all of Europe into the Great War. You, the Tsar, are a man who is caught in a diplomatic bind. Your country is a part of an alliance with France and Great Britain. But your wife, the Empress Alexandra, is German. Your cousin, Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany, is a man you have a deep personal relationship with. But the tides of history are too powerful to resist. You, a man who has no stomach for war, lead your country into a conflict that will ultimately destroy it. The war is a disaster from the very beginning. The Russian army, a massive and unwieldy force, is no match for the modern, efficient German army. The Russian soldiers, many of whom are illiterate peasants, are sent to the front lines with outdated rifles and often with no shoes. The casualties are unimaginable, the defeats are humiliating, and the reports of your army's incompetence are a constant stream of bad news. The people, who were already hungry and angry, are now asked to sacrifice their sons and their husbands for a war that seems to have no end and no purpose. Your wife, the Empress Alexandra, is consumed by this. She is a German princess who is now the empress of a country that is at war with her homeland. She is already deeply unpopular with the Russian people, and the rumors that she is a German spy, a woman who is secretly working to undermine the Russian war effort, begin to circulate. She, in her isolation and her paranoia, turns to the one man she can trust, Rasputin. She listens to him, she trusts him, and she believes that he is the only one who can save your family and your country. One of the more tragic and less known details of the war is the fact that you, in an act of what you believe is patriotic duty, decide to take personal command of the army. This is a disastrous decision. You are not a military genius. You are not a strategist. You are a gentle, indecisive man who has no stomach for the brutal, messy business of war. Your decision to leave the capital and to take command of the army leaves your wife in charge of the government. And she, in her paranoia and her devotion to Rasputin, allows him to run the country from behind the scenes. Historians still debate the extent to which Rasputin was responsible for the chaos and the corruption of the war. Was he truly a German spy? a man who was intentionally working to undermine the war effort? The overwhelming consensus is no, he was not a spy. He was a charlatan, a man who was more interested in his own power and his own appetites than in the fate of the country. But his influence over the Empress, a woman who was in charge of the country, was a disaster. He filled the government with his own cronies, with men who were incompetent and corrupt. The government, which was already in a state of chaos, now descends into a state of outright anarchy. The country is in a state of collapse. The people are starving. The army is in a state of mutiny. The government is a corrupt and incompetent mess. And you, the Tsar, are at the front lines. A man who is a prisoner of his own indecisive nature. You are a man who is more concerned with the feelings of his wife than with the fate of his country. The world around you is about to catch fire. And you, a man who has been a prisoner in your own palace for so long, are about to be consumed by the flames. The whispers of revolution are no longer whispers. They are a loud, angry roar, and they are about to sweep you and your family away. The winter of 1916 is a cold, brutal thing. But the frost is nothing compared to the chill of the news arriving from the front lines and from the starving cities. You, the Tsar, are a man who is a prisoner of his own making. A man who has chosen to remain at the front with the army. A place you are not qualified to be. While your wife, the Empress Alexandra, is left in charge of a country that is on the brink of collapse. Her paranoia, her isolation, and her utter dependence on the Siberian holy man. Rasputin has now reached a fever pitch. The court is a nest of corruption and sycophancy, with Rasputin and his cronies pulling all the strings. The Russian people, starving and furious. See this. They see their country being run by a peasant mystic, a man who is a symbol of everything that is wrong with your rule. The whispers, the rumors. The open hostility towards Rasputin reach a climax in December of 1916. A small group of aristocrats and monarchists, men who are loyal to you and to the Romanov dynasty, but who are terrified of Rasputin's influence, decide to take matters into their own hands. They are led by Prince Felix Yusupov, a wealthy and flamboyant young man who is married to one of your nieces, and Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich, your own cousin. They know that you will never remove Rasputin. They know that your wife will never let him go. So, they decide to do it themselves. The assassination of Rasputin is a bizarre and horrifying affair. A story that is so strange it almost seems like fiction. They lure him to Yusupov's palace with the promise of a party. They try to poison him with cakes and wine laced with cyanide. But to their horror, he doesn't seem to be affected. He eats the cakes, drinks the wine, and seems to be completely fine. In a panic, Yusupov shoots him in the chest. He falls to the ground, seemingly dead. But then, in a terrifying moment, he rises and tries to run. They shoot him again, and again, and again. But he still seems to be alive. Finally, they tie him up, wrap him in a rug, and throw him into the freezing waters of the Neva River. His body is found a few days later. He is dead. But a post-mortem reveals that he did not die from the gunshots, or the poison, but from drowning. He was, in a horrifying twist, still alive when he was thrown into the river. The death of Rasputin is a moment of both relief and a kind of terrible, quiet dread. Your wife, the Empress Alexandra, is inconsolable. She is a woman who has lost her son's healer, her spiritual guide, her only confidant. She is now even more isolated, even more paranoid, and even more determined to believe that Rasputin was a saint who was a victim of a cruel and unjust world. The country, which had hoped that his death would bring a change in your government, sees that nothing has changed. The war still rages. The people are still starving. The government is still a corrupt and incompetent mess. The assassination of Rasputin a desperate attempt to save the monarchy, has done nothing but expose its deep, terminal flaws. One of the more enduring historical controversies about Rasputin's murder is the involvement of British intelligence. Some historians have argued that a British agent was a part of the assassination plot, a theory that has never been definitively proven. The fact is that the British, like everyone else, saw Rasputin as a dangerous figure who was undermining the war effort. The conspiracy theories, however, speak to the power of Rasputin's legend and the utter chaos of the time. Historians still debate whether Rasputin's death could have saved the monarchy. The overwhelming consensus is no. The monarchy was a ship that was already taking on water. Rasputin was a part of the problem, but he was not the sole cause. The real problem was you, a czar who was incapable of making a difficult decision, and a wife who was incapable of seeing the world outside her own family's quiet desperation. The assassination of Rasputin was a last, desperate gasp of a dying empire, a final, brutal act of a world that was about to be swept away forever. The revolution, which had been a low hum for years, is now a loud, angry roar, and it is about to come for you and your family. The end is near. The winter of 1917 is a cold, starving, and unforgiving thing. The assassination of Rasputin has done nothing to quell the growing unrest. In fact, it has only served to expose the deep rot at the core of your government. The country is in a state of outright collapse. The war, a war that has cost Russia millions of lives and an untold amount of money, has become a symbol of your incompetence. The people, who were already hungry and angry, are now being asked to pay the ultimate price for your mistakes. The revolution, which had been a low hum for decades, is now a loud, angry roar. It begins, as so many great revolutions do, with a quiet act of defiance. The women of Petrograd, tired of standing in line for hours for a loaf of bread, take to the streets. The protests grow, and the soldiers, who are also starving and demoralized, refuse to fire on the crowds. The great powerful army of Russia, the army that you command, simply melts away. You, the Tsar, are a man who is a prisoner of his own indecisive nature. You are a man who has no stomach for violence, no stomach for the brutal, messy business of a revolution. You are a man who is more concerned with the feelings of his wife and the health of his son than with the fate of his country. You are a man who, in a moment of great crisis, simply does not know what to do. The pressure from your own ministers, your own family, and your own military commanders becomes unbearable. They all tell you the same thing: you must abdicate. You must give up the throne, you must save the monarchy, and you must save your family. But you are a man who believes in the divine right of the Tsar to rule. A man who believes that his power is a sacred trust from God. To abdicate would be a betrayal of that trust. And yet, you do it. In a small, quiet railway car in March of 1917, you sign the papers. You give up the throne not for yourself, but for your son. Alexei, you cannot bear the thought of him, a sick and fragile boy, having to bear the weight of a throne in a time of great chaos. So you give it to your brother, Grand Duke Michael, but he, in a moment of great political realism, refuses to take it. The monarchy is over. The Romanov dynasty, a dynasty that has ruled Russia for over 300 years, is now just a memory. You are no longer the Tsar. You are now just Nicholas Romanov, a private citizen. You and your family, your wife and your 5 children, are now under house arrest in the Tsarskoye Selo Palace. The world outside your gilded cage is now a world that is completely foreign to you. It is a world of revolution, of chaos, of a new kind of power that has no place for you or your family. One of the less-known details about the abdication is the fact that you, a man who was so indecisive throughout your reign, made a decision that was both selfless and deeply flawed. You abdicated for your son. a boy who, in a world of revolution and political chaos, would have no chance of survival. You abdicated for your brother, a man who, in his political wisdom, refused to take on a burden that he knew would be impossible to bear. You made a decision that was, in its own way, a final brutal act of self-betrayal. Historians still debate whether your abdication was a good thing or a bad thing. Could you have stayed and fought? Could you have saved the monarchy? The overwhelming consensus is no. The monarchy was a ship that was already taking on water. You, in your indecisiveness, were a captain who was incapable of steering it to safety. The revolution was an unstoppable force, a force that was a long time coming. Your abdication, in its own way, was a final, tragic acknowledgement of that fact. The story is not over, however, the final, brutal act of your family's drama is yet to come. The revolution has taken away your throne, but it has not yet taken away your lives. The world outside the palace walls is a maelstrom of chaos. But inside, in the quiet, isolated halls of Tsarskoye Selo, your family's life has taken on a strange, new rhythm. You are no longer the Tsar, but a private citizen, a man named Nicholas Romanov. You and your family are now under house arrest, guarded by soldiers who, just a few months ago, were your subjects. The change is jarring, but in a way, it's a relief. The weight of the crown, the burden of a job you never wanted, is now gone. For the first time in your life, you are a man who is free to be a father and a husband, a man who is free to spend his days with his family. The days are long, but they are peaceful. You and your children play games, read books, and take walks in the garden, all under the watchful eye of the guards. Your wife, the Empress Alexandra, is still a woman who is consumed by her faith and her love for her family. She is a woman who, in the face of a great tragedy, has found a new kind of strength. She is a woman who, in a world that has turned against her, is still devoted to you and to her children. But the peace is fragile, a quiet moment in a storm that is still raging. The new provisional government, a government that is more interested in the future of Russia than in the fate of your family, is in a state of chaos. The Bolsheviks, a radical new political party led by a man named Vladimir Lenin, are gaining power. They are a political force that is not interested in compromise, not interested in a new kind of Russia. They are interested in a new kind of world, a world without czars, without aristocrats, and without the wealthy. In the summer of 1917, a new decision is made. The provisional government decides that it is no longer safe for you and your family to be in Petrograd. They decide to send you to Tobolsk, a small remote town in Siberia. The move is a terrifying one. You are being sent to the very edges of the empire, to a place that is known for its cold, its isolation, and its political exiles. The journey is long and arduous, a grim, slow march to the end of the world. The house in Tobolsk is a large, wooden mansion, a far cry from the gilded palaces of your former life. The guards are now more brutal, more disrespectful. The isolation is complete. You are in a world that is completely foreign to you, a world of peasants and soldiers, a world that has no place for a former czar and his family. The days are still peaceful. In a way, you and your family continue to live out your days in a quiet, isolated world. But the fear is always there, a low, gnawing dread that is always present. You know that you are a prisoner, and you know that your fate is not your own. One of the more heartbreaking details of this period is the children's resilience. The four Grand Duchesses, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, and their younger brother, Alexei, find a way to make a life for themselves in this isolated world. They read books, they put on plays, they keep a diary. They are children, and they are still able to find a way to live. Even in the face of a great tragedy, historians still debate the motives of the Bolsheviks. Did they always intend to kill you and your family? Or was your death a product of the chaos and the paranoia of the time? The overwhelming consensus is that the Bolsheviks, in their political realism, saw you as a dangerous symbol. You were a symbol of the old world, a symbol that could be used by the counter-revolutionaries to rally a rebellion. As long as you were alive, you were a threat. And in a world of political revolution, a threat is a thing that must be eliminated. Must be. The story is nearing its end. The chaos of the revolution, the rise of the Bolsheviks, the fate of your family, it is all coming to a climax. You, a man who has lived his entire life in a gilded cage, are now in a wooden mansion in the middle of nowhere. You are a man who has lost everything your throne, your wealth, your power, but you still have your family. And in a world of revolution and political chaos, that is the one thing that matters. The final, brutal act of your family's drama is about to begin, and it will not be a glorious public spectacle. It will be a quiet, cold-blooded act in the middle of the night. The year is 1918. The world outside your isolated Siberian prison is a new and terrifying place. The Bolsheviks have seized power, and a brutal civil war is now raging across Russia. The great, powerful empire you once ruled is now a bloody battlefield, a place where a new, terrible kind of world is being born. You and your family, the last remnants of the old world, are now in the city of Ekaterinburg. A new, more dangerous prison, the house. A mansion that once belonged to a wealthy merchant is now a fortress, with armed guards, barred windows, and a constant, suffocating sense of dread. The days are long and filled with a quiet, gnawing dread. The guards are brutal, and their disdain for you and your family is palpable. They carve crude, anti-monarchist drawings on the walls. They play loud, boisterous music at all hours of the night. They are a constant reminder that the old world is gone, and a new, more brutal one is now in charge. You, a man who has lived his entire life with the quiet dignity of a czar, are now a man who is a prisoner of his own past. The political situation is a maelstrom of chaos. The White Army, a coalition of counter-revolutionaries, is gaining ground, and they are moving towards Ekaterinburg. The Bolsheviks, in their paranoia, are terrified that you and your family will be rescued and used as a symbol to rally the rebellion. They are a political force that is not interested in compromise, not interested in a new kind of Russia. They are interested in a new kind of world, a world that has no place for you or your family. And so, the decision is made. It is not a formal one, not a grand trial. It is a quiet, brutal, and cold-blooded decision that is made in the dark of night. The man in charge of your fate, a local Bolshevik leader named Yakov Yurovsky, is given the orders. You and your family are a dangerous symbol, and a dangerous symbol is a thing that must be eliminated. The final night, a cold, quiet night in July of 1918, is a blur of terrifying events. You and your family are woken up in the middle of the night and told to get dressed. You are told that you are being moved to a new, safer location, and you, in your quiet dignity, believe them. You and your wife, your 4 daughters, and your son, the young Tsarevich Alexei, are led down a flight of stairs and into a small, dark basement room. The guards are there, and their faces are grim. The air is thick with a terrible, suffocating dread. Yurovsky reads out the final sentence, a short, brutal statement of your fate. You are being executed. And then, the guns begin to fire, the screams, the terror, the chaos. It is a brutal, cold-blooded act that shatters the silence of the night. The assassins, in their panic, are not able to kill you and your family with the first volley of shots. The Grand Duchesses, who have diamonds and jewelry sewn into their corsets, are protected from the bullets. The assassins, in their frustration, use their bayonets and the butts of their rifles to finish the job. It is a horrifying, brutal, and intimate act of murder. The Romanov dynasty, a dynasty that has ruled Russia for over 300 years, is now gone. The bodies are taken to a nearby forest, where they are doused in acid and burned in a shallow grave. The location of the grave is kept a secret for decades, a secret that is a source of speculation, of rumor, and of a quiet, historical dread. The Bolsheviks, in their paranoid realism, have done what they had to do. They have killed a dangerous symbol, and they have secured the revolution. But they have also committed a brutal and cold-blooded act of murder, an act that will forever stain their legacy. One of the more poignant and heartbreaking details of the assassination is the fate of the Tsarevich Alexei, the young boy, who had been protected from the world by a loving, desperate mother, died in a brutal, cold-blooded act of violence. His life, a life that had been so filled with a quiet, personal tragedy, came to a brutal and tragic end. Historians still debate the role of Lenin in the assassination. Was he the one who gave the orders? Or was it a local decision made by a man who was afraid of a counter-revolution? The overwhelming consensus is that Lenin, in his political realism, gave the final order. The Romanovs were a symbol, a dangerous symbol that had to be eliminated, and in a world of revolution and political chaos, a symbol is a thing that must be destroyed. You, a man who was once the Tsar of all of Russia, are now a ghost, the quiet. Family drama that defined your reign has now come to a brutal, cold-blooded end. Your story, a story of a reluctant ruler, a desperate mother, a sickly son, and a peasant mystic, is a testament to the fact that even in a world of immense power, a single personal tragedy can bring an entire empire to its knees. Your family's final house, a small, dark basement room in the middle of nowhere, is now a monument to that terrible truth. The silence of the night is a soft, comforting presence now, a quiet blanket that settles over the world. The cold, dark basement room in Ekaterinburg, the screams, the terror, the brutality, it all feels like a dream now. A terrible, feverish dream that has long since passed. The ghosts of the Romanovs, the ghosts of the great, powerful family that once ruled a sixth of the world, are now at rest. They can no longer be hurt. They can no longer be betrayed. They are, at last, at peace. The weight of their story, the weight of their love and their tragedy, is now just a whisper in the wind, a quiet memory in the long, winding road of history. Let the hum of the fan, or the soft sounds of your home, carry you away, drift, sleep, be at peace. Sleep. Be